At about 2:47 p.m., a Ukrainian Mi-24 flew low and slow, right into the crosshairs of a Russian Igla missile battery. It looked like a pilot error, a fatal one. But what followed was anything but ordinary. Within 8 minutes, the men who fired at that helicopter were destroyed. How did a $1,500 to $5,000 FPV drone outplay a state-supplied MANPAD system? I'll walk you through the who, what, how, and the real numbers that made this possible. This isn't luck. It was a deliberate operation. Soviet hardware, modern sensors, cheap drones. We'll break down exactly how many rockets that HIN carried, what the Igla system is capable of, and how flares plus ground explosions turned what seemed like a trap into a counter-trap. At 14:47, the sky over the contested zone changed from routine to dangerous. A Ukrainian Mi-24, that hulking, workmanlike hind you've seen in countless videos, pushed into the area on a mission that was anything but casual. It wasn't just flying, it was carrying a thundercloud, 4 B-8V rocket pods, each stuffed with 20 S-8 rockets. That's 80 rockets hanging off the airframe, ready to turn a stretch of ground into a storm of metal and fire. Those S-8s aren't all the same. Some are designed to infiltrate armor. Heat rounds that can pierce up to about 400 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor, while others disperse deathly fragments over a broad area, and still others create dramatic fuel-air effects. In other words, the Hind was a Swiss Army knife of destruction that could take out tanks 1 minute and dig in troops the next, or whatever happened to be unlucky enough to find itself in its downdraft. If the pilot releases all 4 pods at once, the result is instant and brutal. A roughly 500-meter swath pounded with rockets, smoke, and secondary fires, turning Earth into chaos. For people on the ground, that's instant confusion and extreme danger. Seen from the other side, the helicopter looked like a prize. A Russian MANPAD's team sat about 3.2 kilometers away with a 9K-38 Igla within effective reach. Igla's max range is roughly 5.2 kilometers. Missile weight and warhead figures per open sources. From their vantage, a low-exposed Hind inside their engagement envelope was textbook, a clear shot and, by the book, a likely kill. On paper, at least, the Hind had flown into an ambush. The Russian Igla team wasted no time. Once the Mi-24 Hind entered their engagement envelope, they acquired a lock and launched a missile. The 9K-38 Igla's missile leaves the tube at blistering speed, accelerating to roughly Mach 1.9, or nearly twice the speed of sound. It is guided by a passive infrared seeker, homing in on the heat of the helicopter's twin engines. On paper, this was a flawless engagement. The Hind's exhaust plumes provided a strong infrared target, and the crew had every reason to believe their shot would connect. But this was not a routine encounter, it was part of a carefully prepared setup. The moment the missile was in the air, the Mi-24 unleashed its payload. All 80 S-8 rockets roared out of the 4 pods in a blinding salvo. The ground below exploded into chaos as impacts ignited mud, fuel, and vegetation, creating a fiery patchwork of secondary explosions and thick smoke. Each impact generated a distinct thermal signature. At the same time, the Hind deployed 12 infrared countermeasure flares, each burning at over 2,000 degrees Celsius. These flares produced points that were brighter than the helicopter's exhaust and caused a large number of false targets in the sky. Modern IR-guided missiles, such as the Igla, are smart enough so that they can differentiate genuine targets from distractions, countermeasures, but the sudden congregation of flares, rocketry explosions, and ground fire created a thermal battlefield too busy for the seeker to be followed. The result, the missile loses the hot Hind's exhaust plume and instead locks onto one of the hotter signatures. The result, the missile veered off course, losing the Hind's exhaust plume and instead locking onto one of the hotter signatures, likely a flare or burning patch of Earth. In seconds, what had begun as a perfect missile shot collapsed into failure. For the helicopter crew, survival depended on milliseconds. Yet the maneuver worked exactly as intended. The missile detonated harmlessly and the Hind escaped intact, leaving behind only smoke, fire, and confusion. Firing a MANPADS is not an invisible act. Beyond the visible plume and the thermal spike, a launch produces a suite of detectable signatures. A sudden localized acoustic shock, a distinct infrasound and pressure wave, thermal bursts, and often radio or comms chatter as the crew coordinates and reports. Modern counterforces exploit all of these channels. In Ukraine's case, years of battlefield learning pushed a simple idea into a powerful reality. Cheap, distributed sensors plus fast data fusion equals near-instant attribution. Ukraine has rolled out networks of inexpensive acoustic listening nodes, smartphone and microphone arrays, and purpose-built modules often described under names like Sky Fortress that detect the sound signatures of drones, cruise missiles, and rocket salvos from many kilometers away. These units are low-cost, reportedly in the hundreds of dollars per node, and are designed to triangulate a source by comparing time of arrival and waveform features across multiple sensors. When fused with overhead imagery, drone feeds, and local human reports, that acoustic fix becomes a precise geolocation within minutes, sometimes seconds. The science behind this is well established. Scientists and engineers have known for years that you can actually hear a rocket launch long before you see it, not just with ears, but with arrays of acoustic and infrasound sensors that pick up the unique thump and pressure wave of a missile firing. When those sensor recordings are run through the right processing, they can point back to a direction and elevation and separate a real launch from ordinary background noise. Ukraine has taken that lab work and turned it into a battlefield tool. Acoustic signatures, sometimes even captured on soldier smartphones, are fed into AI-assisted systems that instantly say, "That was a MANPADS launch," instead of idle noise. What used to need tape review, human triangulation, or hours of reconnaissance now often becomes actionable intelligence in minutes, shrinking uncertainty and speeding up the chance to respond. Crucially, acoustic detection is only one piece. Modern sensor fusion blends passive acoustics, triangulation of rocket/missile sound, optical/IR drone imagery, visual confirmation, SIGINT/communications intercepts if available, and human reporting from forward observers. When these feeds converge, the previously anonymous MANPAD's crew becomes a fixed target, coordinates, movement vectors, and a short time window for response. That is exactly what converts a missed missile into an opportunity to strike back with an FPV loitering munition. The speed and low cost of Ukraine's network and the open literature showing acoustic detection viability are why a single launch can now trigger a lethal counterstrike within minutes. Within minutes of the failed EGLA engagement, the battlefield's new advantage, speedy, low-cost precision, takes over. Once the launch location is fixed by acoustic triangulation, drone imagery, or human observers, a small first-person view FPV kamikaze drone can be readied and launched in short order. These are not multi-million-dollar cruise missiles. Typical single-use FPV strike drones carry warheads of roughly 1 to 1.5 kilograms and are built from off-the-shelf motors, carbon fiber frames, and commercial batteries. Their unit cost is measured in the low thousands of dollars, not millions, a fact noted in recent field and analytical reporting on Ukraine's drone tactics. The tactic is brutally simple and chillingly effective. An FPV pilot launches a purpose-built strike drone and keeps it low, skimming treetops, slipping through hollows in the landscape, all to stay below radar horizons and out of the sweep of larger air defense systems. The pilot isn't flying by instinct. They're watching everything through the drone's own eyes. A jittery, high-definition video feed streams back to goggles or a monitor, and with that live picture, the operator can steer with millimeter precision even as the craft closes at speed. What started as a crude flying frame becomes a surgical tool, threaded through small gaps, dodging detection, and guided to place an explosive payload exactly where it will do the most damage. That low, fast profile makes FPV strikes devastating against fleeting, exposed targets. Think of a crew hurriedly breaking down a 9K-38 EGLA launcher, lugging tubes and batteries, shouting into radio. They're distracted, vulnerable, and often out in the open. Time and again, open-source footage shows the pattern. A small drone appears from nowhere at point-blank range and detonates a shaped charge or compact explosive load beside or above the team. The blast isn't pretty, it's close quarters, brutal, and messy, but it produces lethal overpressure and fragmentation that can kill or incapacitate people and ruin light equipment. The economics are stark, too. Where a guided missile costs tens or hundreds of thousands, an FPV strike platform, frame, motor, radio, warhead is often measured in the low thousands. Timing is the weapon's ally. A missile launch creates a narrow window when the crew is visible, possibly distracted and preparing to move. The sensor fix that used to take tens of minutes can now produce actionable coordinates in a couple of minutes. An FPV drone can close that distance and strike within the same rapid timeline, turning an impulsive shot into a fatal mistake for the firers. Analyses of battlefield footage and expert commentary underline this pattern. Cheap drones plus fast intel are producing effects disproportionate to their price. This combination, acoustic/optical detection, rapid tasking, and low-cost loitering munitions, explains how an IGLA crew that thought it had a clean engagement can be destroyed 8 minutes after pulling the trigger. It's a tactical lesson. In modern sensor-rich battle spaces, firing a weapon can make you targetable just as quickly as it makes you dangerous. This single event is more than tactical, it's systemic. It forces Russian MANPAD's crews to hesitate or demand confirmation before firing, slowing their reaction time. It gives Ukrainian helicopters more freedom to operate, knowing that any engagement can be traced and countered. It shows that cheap tech plus smart doctrine can outweigh pure hardware. FPV drones, sensor fusion, flares, these are relatively low cost but high impact. Recent reporting shows Ukraine's air defense has evolved under pressure. Light systems, improvised drones, acoustic sensors are used together to counter a wide range of threats. Also, Russia has lost an estimated 234 aircraft, about 11% of its pre-war air force, since the beginning of the full invasion. That includes losses from aircraft, helicopters, drones. In less than 10 minutes, a Ukrainian Mi-24 Hind, some well-timed flares, the chaos of ground impacts, and a $2,000 FPV drone completely changed the outcome of what looked like a certain loss. At first, the helicopter seemed to make a critical error, flying straight into a missile team's crosshairs. But instead of becoming a victim, it turned into bait, drawing out the IGLA crew, exposing their position, and ensuring their destruction minutes later. The lesson is clear. Air defense today isn't just about who has the better missile or faster aircraft. It isn't enough anymore to field the flashiest weapon. Victory increasingly comes down to who can weave together sensors, deception, and lightning-fast countermeasures into a single coherent move. On today's battlefields, the invisible work matters as much as the visible. Acoustic microphones listening for rocket fire, cheap drones streaming live video, satellite snapshots, intercepted radio traffic, and even cell phone reports all feed a picture that can be built in minutes. Layer onto that a few well-timed tricks, decoy flares, simulated movements or deliberately staged attacks, and a modest force can create confusion that undermines much larger systems. This means the premium is on agility. Moves on the modern battlefield favor the quick and the clever. Units that can change plans on the fly, hide what they're about to do, and spot tiny openings get to dictate the tempo. A single slip, a hurried missile launch, a bad firing position, or even an exposed supply stop can be picked up by ears, lenses, or radios, stitched together by someone watching the data, and turned into a deadly strike before the shooter has finished grabbing their kit. This incident highlights a shift in military logic. Expensive systems are increasingly vulnerable to cheap, flexible, and intelligent tools. Every missile launch now carries a hidden risk. The act of firing may give away a crew's position and invite immediate retaliation. For global militaries, this isn't a small adjustment, it's a warning. The balance of risk versus reward has changed, and doctrine must evolve just as fast. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, hit like, subscribe, and tell me, do you think doctrines will change fast enough to meet this new kind of threat?